And Dylan's going to take us through some of the Ableton stuff. So
yeah, good.
Let's get started. I'll sit down over here.
Okay, cool. Hi, thank you for coming. So I did come here from Berlin, but I'm actually from New Zealand, which is why I sound like this. So I'm going to show you through. So we've just released a new version of Live 10. I'm going to show you through that, but I'm also just going to show you a bit about what Ableton is and what it does in general. Who here is using Live currently? Oh, everyone, good, okay. Most people. Have people tried Live 10 yet? Okay, cool. All right, so I'll kind of go through some of the new stuff. I'm going to show some of the stuff that's been in Live for a while, but might be something you know about, might be something you don't. So let me just nuke the set and we'll go back to scratch. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a piece of music and kind of talk through what I'm doing as I go. Oh, oops, that's what I wanted. So I'm going to start with just an empty Midi track. And I'm going to go through, in Live 10 we added a whole lot of new sounds. The sound library's been pretty massively updated actually. One of the guys that worked a lot on that is a guy called Rory St. John, who's from Ireland actually. And so I'm just going to go find a drum kit. I've got these things at the top here. Who uses the browser very much? These things in the top, the colorful things, are favorites that you can put things in. Those things can be sounds, presets, devices, doesn't really matter. The nice thing about it is that sounds like a drum kit to me. The nice thing about this is it just works with the computer keyboard. So while you're cruising around either your packs or your library and stuff, you just use the number keys on the keyboard to add or remove an item from a color. So you can see the demo one I've got there is number 5. If I push 5, the little blue square goes away. If I push the 5 key again, it comes back. So it's really easy to go through and make collections of things that you like. It works really well on push, especially because if you're browsing for stuff on push, you can get straight to the stuff that you use all the time. So I'm going to make a beat. So let's do that first. It's quite loud. Good. So I just played something. I quite like that. You'll notice I wasn't recording and Live wasn't actually playing while I did that. What I'm going to do now is push this button in the top here. It's called Capture. It's that little one up there. You can also do this on push. Cool. So what Live did then when I played that, it's guessed the loop slightly wrong, but what Live does is it guesses the tempo of what you're playing and it guesses the loop as well. So I was playing at 143.5 BPM, it turns out. What's nice about this is you don't have to think about it when you want to record something. Normally if you try and make a piece of music, I don't know, do people use samples? Like, so if you're, especially if you're using samples, but even if you're just playing drums, like often you'll play something and you get a feel and you're like, oh, that's exactly what I want. And then as soon as you have to like turn the metronome on and try and figure out the speed of it and stuff, it just kind of all gets ruined. So what's nice about Capture is you can just build a piece of music. Live will guess. Usually it gets it right actually, and it's pretty easy to adjust if it doesn't. It'll capture if you play. It works for drums or for keyboards and other sounds. If you can play for a long time and it'll remember everything that you've done and it'll capture a loop of the last part. But you can zoom back in and find the stuff that you played earlier on. So I'm going to take that and let's add another element to it. So we're going to go through. This one's called Chop and Swing. There's some good samples in here that I quite like. Loops and chords, electric piano, that's what I want. So let's find a sample to mess with. Yeah, that's the one, quite like that. So I'm going to make a Midi track, throw my sample down onto my Midi track. It's an octave down. Who here uses, do you guys use the Simpler much to do sampling and making your own instruments and things like that? So I'm just going to quickly bash through and make this into a sound that I like. So let's shorten that up a bit. Turn loop on. Let's fade that so it doesn't click. Put some drive in with the filters so there we go. And I'm going to use portamento so that it bends when I play different notes. Record that either, but capture will also work while you're playing and while you're making music as well. So it's captured a couple of bars at the end there. Actually, what I wanted was this whole longer phrase that I played, so I'm going to pull the clip back to the front. And so now I've got that sample that I was just playing. So capture kind of changes the way you make music, actually, because you don't think about recording anymore. I've found that when I'm making stuff now, I think very little about whether I'm actually going to play the thing that I want to play. I just play, and then when I do something I like, I can just hit a button and grab it. So yeah, if you're someone that likes to mess around, or someone that I often find as soon as you push record, you play worse than if you were not recording. So this way, you will never play bad again. Yeah, so this kind of works. You can overdub and create variations and all that kind of stuff. So you can keep building up layers within a track, or you can keep adding tracks and just capturing as you go and building up a sound. So next I'm going to show, I'll jump into the effects a little bit. So I work in the sound team at Ableton, which means I work with the people that do all of the instruments and the effects and the sound content and that kind of stuff. And we made a bunch of new devices for Live 10. There's one that I really like myself, which is called Echo, because I like dub delays. So I'll make a, actually I don't want an audio track, I'm going to put this on a Midi track, and let's find something to play through this. What am I going to play through that? I'm going to load up, there's a new suitcase piano, this one. Let's load that up. So there's a new multi-sampled Rhodes piano and Wurlitzer in Live 10 as well, which are really nice instruments to play. So Echo is, I'll work with it on the push here so that I don't keep cutting backwards and forwards, sorry about that. I'm going to turn the sync off for the left-hand side so that I get it in free time. Echo is really nice because it's got a lot of characteristics of like really classic Bucket Brigade delays or tape delays and stuff like that. It's not really any one of those things. When we were making this thing, we didn't look at like how can we clone this particular piece of hardware or this particular thing. We looked at a whole lot of different hardware and delays and sort of thought about the characteristics we'd like to have. So this has filters in the feedback path, which is the kind of thing you might do with a dub mixer and return sends. It has input distortion, so you can clip the input of it, which is like when you plug a guitar or something into a tape delay, you're usually getting a bit of distortion from the preamp on the front. It does this kind of re-pitching, bending stuff that Bucket Brigade analog delays do. It also has modulation, so that you can modulate the, this is what the modulation looks like. You can modulate the delay time to make seasick underwater sounds, like this. The modulation can modulate the delay times, or it can also modulate the filters as well. lets you, let me just turn that feedback down a little bit. The modulation, the character section lets you do stuff like add tape noise and things like that as well, which is really nice. You can gate the noise out if you want, and you can get a bit of wobble to get your sort of like seasick Boards of Canada type stuff going on. So it's a really capable delay. We've kind of embedded the, a lot of the, as you can see on the push, a lot of the visual feedback and stuff it's happening in the software, but it also is happening in the push, which makes it really nice to work with. Let me get that beat going again and we'll find something to play. So it's a really nice playable delay. I quite like it because I like messing with stuff while it's playing, and using the automation and grabbing the movements as you go lets you create these really kind of like authentic sounds that you might get from hardware. If you leave the feedback up too loud, it will just go forever also. So let's turn that off. So it's a very cool effect. You can get pretty lost in that one. So what else can I show you about Live 10? There's a lot of changes in here, and if you all stuck your hands up before and said you used Live quite a bit, there's a ton of things that you don't notice at first or might take you a while to realize are there, and they make a big difference to how you work with it. So when we set out to build Live 10, we didn't set off with like, we need the most marketing features of all time in order to have the best list of bullet points. We set off with the idea of supporting dedicated music makers, people that spend a lot of time with our software, spend a lot of time making music. And so we looked at both things that maybe they didn't know they wanted, like an echo device was kind of something we added that's new, but at the same time we looked a lot at the things that were already there and how we could make them better. So there's some, not simple, but there's some important things like, this is kind of a boring one, but kind of awesome if you're a nerd, which is that you can now name the inputs and outputs of your sound card. It's not that exciting, but it's kind of awesome, because if you've got I use it hooked up to my modular, and now I can know what the things that I'm plugging into are actually called. There's stuff like MP3 export. The browser now previews drum samples without quantization so that you can quickly go through a lot of drum samples, stuff like this. None of these are like big bullet point exciting features, but they make a huge difference when you're making music with it. So we focused a little bit on a mixture of like the bigger changes, like the devices and the sound library, but also a lot of stuff just to hopefully make the music making flow a bit more. Thinking less was the idea. So there's a few other things in there which are pretty cool. Maybe I'll show you a little bit of working with samples in the arrangement, because there's quite a lot of cool stuff that we did with the way that you work with audio in the arrangement. So let me just find a sample to throw in. This is my friend, my colleague Costas, running around hitting things in a rusty ship, it would appear. So let's do some stuff with this sample and make this into something that can be part of that tune we were just listening to. So firstly, I'm going to warp the sample and set the start on a beat so that it actually kind of makes some musical sense. Okay, so I've got, stretch that. Let's kind of warp this and make it into more of a rhythm. Okay, cool. And some of the stuff that's new, I don't know if you're not sure how many of you use automation, but you'll notice that you can't see the automation at the moment. And it's because we've put the automation into a new mode, which you get at by pushing A. And then you can choose things to automate, like the speaker or the volume and stuff like that. The reason we did that is because we wanted to make it easier to work with editing audio directly in the arrangement. So by taking the automation away, it let us do more stuff with the clips so that when you're working with them, you can use the mouse more easily to do stuff. For example, I can select this piece and hit R. It flips the sample over backwards for me. That doesn't sound quite how I want it. I can also, if I hold down Alt and Shift, let's zoom in a little bit. I'm going to zoom in on this piece by pushing the Z key, which zooms me right in. By holding Alt and Shift, I can drag the sound around, but leave the piece in place. This is really awesome for editing and finding. That looks kind of like it's going to go backwards into that other part quite nicely. Let's see what. Yeah, cool. So you can also Shift Z to zoom back out again if you've zoomed right in on something. I'm going to. So that piece there, I actually want that to go faster. I'm going to go Shift, hold the edge of it, and stretch the thing like this. So you can kind of do some of the warping actions directly in the arrangement as well. So between the being able to reverse stuff, warp it directly, and slide it around, the way that you can work with editing audio is actually quite a lot faster. Okay, those bits aren't in time. Let's do some hacking up here. Let's move that over there. Bend that over there. That we want. Actually, I don't want that. I want this piece. Here, I can just. Oh, what am I doing? Yep. Cool. I can also do stuff. Let's just sort of delete the rest of that. I won't make you watch me edit 5 minutes of field recording. It'll be a particularly exciting demonstration. Let's just repeat this first chunk a couple of times for simplicity's sake. Okay, so I've got this kind of field recording looping now. I'm going to use auto filter to kind of shape the sound of that. I'm going to use one of the analog modeled filters and stick it in high pass mode. So I've got that sound going on. I've put an effect on it and kind of got it into the space I want. I actually want to stick an EQ after that and take a bit of the top end off as well. So I'm using the high-pass filter to resonate the low end. It's kind of backwards, but a resonant high-pass filter injects a lot of low end if it's swept down. So I'm going to show. Cool. So now what I want to do is maybe this piece here, I'm going to drag this down into the empty space. And I get a new track with that sample on it, but also with the same effects and stuff in place. So you can actually kind of deconstruct a sample this way across tracks just by pulling pieces down into the empty space, and you get the same sound, but now I can stick, on that one hit, I can stick reverb, which is, I'll turn solo off. So let me stop my clips in the session view. I'm going to group those together and call this boat, because that's a boat. And then I'm going to group my drum kit that I had earlier and the boat together and call that beat, boat beat. That's a good idea, boat beat. So yeah, something else, it's a little, well, it's not a little thing, but you can group stuff inside groups. If you're working with samples this way and kind of deconstructing something across a lot of tracks, what you usually find is you end up with like millions of tracks of stuff, and it's quite hard to organize either for editing or for mixing purposes. So now I've pulled it apart like this, I can group it back up, and then when I go to the mixer, I've just got one thing called boat with a volume fader that I can work with, which is kind of cool. So let's see how boat goes with beat, with the chords. Yeah, so I've kind of skipped through quite a bit of stuff quite quickly, but as you can see, it's a lot of these things just kind of make the process of putting a piece of music together that bit easier, or you get interrupted less and have to stop and think about what happens next. There's a whole lot of other stuff in Live 10. The sound content alone, I could probably spend a couple of hours on. I'm not going to do that to you, but we could go through all the rad drum kits and stuff. There's a lot more sounds. We work with heaps of artists and sound designers. There's a few other devices as well. There's one called Drum Bus, which is pretty special, which is fantastic for percussion. Maybe I'll show you that real quick. There's also a Wavetable synth, which I might show you a little bit later on maybe. And we've got a new pedal distortion as well. So this one here is Drum Bus. It's basically like a dedicated drum processor. It's really nice for... It has transient shaping, drive, low-end injection, all this kind of stuff. You're kind of losing the low end on the system in here, but you can inject low frequencies, control the decay, all this kind of stuff. So if you want to like take all your drums and really bring them together, it's a fantastic device. Yeah, so that's kind of a lot of the new stuff. There's other things, multi-clip editing, so you can select a bunch of MIDI clips, edit them at the same time. Max for Live is now built in, which makes a huge difference. There's heaps of really cool new devices there, like LFOs and one called Shaper, which is like a cool modulation and control device. So it's a pretty deep update, but the main thing we wanted to do was not break what was already there. So we were quite careful not to change things too much. If you know how to use Live 9, Live 10 should feel pretty comfortable, even though a lot of things have been refined and polished along the way. Do you want to have a bit of a chat now, and maybe I can show a bit more of it later?
Let's give me a round of applause. That was brilliant. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
I was just tripping off. I don't know about anybody else. I was just thinking, this is a lovely way to spend a Friday afternoon or evening. It's great to see a kind of just slowly a track emerging. Do you do much writing yourself? Do you have time?
Yeah, I've got 2 kids and a job and a dog and a modular synth hobby. So yeah, I used to do commercial music production and writing, so I used to write a lot. I still do write a fair bit, but I try and keep music fun, if that makes sense. So because I work for an awesome company. Yeah. I make music during the day for my job, which is kind of cool. But I try to keep, when I'm making music at home, I try and keep it fun. So often, for me, it's more about the process of creation than the actual output that I might create.
I have to ask you, when you're at home, do you use Ableton?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit hard because you're like 11 o'clock at night and you've had 2 beers and you're playing with your modular and you're like, wait, I've got to like write this thing down about work now. So it's actually kind of tricky to keep the balance between, and it's a common thing I think at Ableton. Most of the people I work with are musicians or write music, and finding that separation between work and music is actually kind of hard when you do music for a job.
The employees in Ableton, what percentage of them, like everyone who I've met, seems to make music? Like, how many is there, 150, 140 in Ableton, something like that?
No, it's about 280 or so worldwide, something like that. I'm not quite sure, actually. There's at least a couple of hundred in the Berlin office, and then we have an office in LA and Tokyo as well with a few people. But
the ones in Berlin, how many of them are musicians? Just half of them?
Probably 80, 90%. Yeah. So, most people come to Ableton because they're passionate about music. Yeah. Not everyone, but most people either they make music or they're like avidly into music in some way, whether that's going to gigs or watching performances.
Your job title is product owner of sound, and it's a pretty amazing title. What does that actually mean?
I just own some products,
No, but what kind of responsibilities do you have? Because it's great, you know what I mean?
So product owner is like, we do agile development and for our software development practice, and product owner means you're the kind of person in charge of prioritizing what the teams work on. So you're usually kind of representing the user or the musician and trying to make sure that the things that the developers or teams are working on is the stuff that's actually important to musicians. So it kind of ranges, it can be pretty broad, and it's even amongst the different people that do product owner at Ableton, it depends on the person exactly which part of it they do. But for me it means we write what we call stories about the things that people want to do, and then you make sure you work with the teams to understand how to deliver that to people. So, for example, with Echo, we knew we wanted to make Echo. It's not like we started with a drawing of that thing and then just made it. We knew what we wanted to do, and we knew the kind of stuff people wanted to be able to do with it. So we wanted to make something that people could use to create all these kind of classic sounds. We wanted it to not emulate hardware, but to, in some cases, replace it. So, and we had sonic references like playlists of music. We were like, we want to be able to make these kinds of sounds. So representing that part is a big part of it. But then working with the people that do a lot of the design and implementation, and really kind of, it's quite a strong feedback loop.
Yeah.
A lot of discussion and just kind of helping steer the way that it goes, I guess.
Now it's 4 years since the release of 9. Okay, so
It's 5 actually.
5, is it?
Yeah.
I'm getting all the numbers wrong.
I started at Ableton just after Live 9 came out. Yeah.
Okay. Was it 4 but before? I think between that, so there's always a big gap. So what I'm saying is it's a big deal when a new product release comes out.
Yeah,
so how long have you been working on 10, or in terms of inside of Ableton?
Well, I mean, the bulk of Live 10 started to actually come together in the software in the last couple of years, but some of the research or work thinking about the topics that are in there happened a lot earlier. So the Wavetable synth, for example, has been either being worked on as a concept or as a prototype pretty much since Live 9 came out.
Okay.
It really came together, and the team, the number of people working on it got more over the years as it got more solid as a concept. Some of the research and capture, the way that it works out the tempo and loops the music. There's a guy called Andrew Robertson who made a device called Beat Seeker based on a lot of research he did over many years.
That was a Max for Live device.
That was a Max for Live device. That one was designed to follow an acoustic drummer and have the software follow the speed. And so a lot of the research behind that is actually how capture understands what to do when you play in the MIDI notes to it. So some of those research tracks run for many years.
Very interesting. And for instance, how long was Echo in the design in mind?
We've probably had Max for Live prototypes of delay stuff. I mean, it wasn't like this in the early days, but probably for 2.5 years at least, I think. Okay. So a lot of the times we prototype a lot of our stuff in Max for Live. So we'll start with an idea, and then maybe a developer will make like a piece of DSP that does the thing that you want, and then we wrap that up inside a Max external and build a UI in Max for Live, and then we just go through that kind of iteration. So Echo's probably been through like, I don't know, probably hundreds of variants over the time. So you'll get something, you play with it, you're like, oh, this sounds cool, and that bit sucks, and I hate that, but this part's awesome, and then you give it back, and then the next day someone's like, oh, cool, well, I thought I changed this, and I added this thing onto it, and now it's got more distortion and filters. Here, try that, sort of thing. So it can be pretty fluid, yeah.
Very good. I'd like to ask you a couple of wider questions about Ableton now.
Sure.
So, for instance, push, how integral is that to the future of Ableton? It's over the last few years, it's becoming more and more centered in terms of performance and creativity. Is that something that you plan to continue with?
We definitely do. I mean, I guess maybe the way to think about it is like, for us, push is kind of the embodiment of what live is as an instrument. So it's a thing you can put your hands on and you can play, and it's designed, the intention is that you don't really have to look at the computer for a large part of the creative process. There's some stuff that you need to do on the computer, like the kind of editing I was doing before, but push is designed to be an instrument you can play. So it's important to us to continue to embody live and hardware, because push is kind of expensive, and it's kind of a big investment for people, and we want to make something of the highest quality, and so that's why we build it ourselves, and we put a lot of time and energy into it. But it's really kind of an extension of what live is, I suppose. So it relies on the main concepts that live has really being embodied in hardware. Yeah.
Do you have many people own Push 2 or use Push 2? Just a quick show of hands. Because if you haven't used 10, it's actually like a new instrument. It's quite incredible the way it's really the work that's gone in. And I think that for the bit of feedback I've got so far from students is that a lot of people maybe will think about Push 2 going, well, will Ableton release Push 3? Yeah. And now they've suddenly seen that Push 2 is going, okay, this is actually turned into something great. So definitely recommend.
Well, part of that's because, I mean, the idea is with an instrument is that all of you have to put a lot of time into learning the software or the instrument, and you want that investment to last. You don't want it to change all the time. So for us, we see that like making music is hard. People put a lot of time into learning how to make music, so we should respect that in the things that we make, and they should be something that if you invest the time, that time you've invested lasts or remains valuable to you. You know what I mean?
Makes sense. And just one other question, I just want to ask, how many people use Max for Live? Even Max for Live for like devices? Okay. Because one of the big changes in 10 is the way that Max not only looks different, it seems the colors have changed, everything.
Yeah, we redesigned a lot of the devices. We basically built,
and I have to ask you as well, Ableton has bought Max now, so is that...
Yeah, we acquired Cycling 74, who are the company that make Max. So Max is for those of you that don't know, it's a visual programming language that you can build your own stuff in outside of Live. Max for Live is that programming environment put inside Live to make devices and instruments. What we did for 10 was we built it in. So we acquired Cycling. They still run pretty much independently and do their own thing. They have a large customer base, and a lot of academic institutions using Max to teach audio, a lot of audio-visual practice and stuff, especially multi-speaker install and this kind of stuff. So Max for Live is kind of a slightly narrower window into the world of what Max can do. And so what we did for 10 was we built the Max application inside of Live, so you don't have to download it separately or install anything. And we took all of the devices that were there and we overhauled them and tried to make them more consistent and easier to use. And we also worked with the Cycling team to optimize like the loading times and the amount of CPU that it uses and stuff like that. So it's kind of just all around a bit more stable and easier to get at, because it's just there and it just works. It was actually called, the sticker on the wall for a long time was called Max Just Works. That was kind of the mission, and that's what we did. Yeah.
And it's one of the things that Max always struck me about is that it brings in this other community around Ableton of designers who are putting up free Max software. And Max for Live devices are either going to be free or they're going to cost like 20 or 30 euros. Yep. And as you said, like the Beat Seeker was like 30 euros, I think, when it came out. Yeah. So it's a really it's great to see that's going to become, I think, a more integral part of Ableton's future.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we're definitely committed to Max for Live in the long term. Otherwise, we wouldn't have bought Cycling closer to us. But yeah, the cool thing is that I think a lot of the people that are making Max for Live stuff are not programmers. Like, they're not people that are sitting down and like, cool, today I'm going to just whip up some DSP and C++. It's more like people that are like, I've got this idea where I want to do this thing, and Max is kind of a sort of an easier way to head that way than trying to sit there and write code. So there's so many things that exist as examples or lessons and stuff, and because it's visual, you can kind of open it up and go, okay, this happens, then this happens, and that wire there, I want it to go to that thing actually. So it's a bit of an easier journey into creating your own tools or your own things for your creative practice, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's what's very interesting. And that community part is like part of Loop. Loop is a 3-day, 4-day festival that's in Berlin.
It's usually 3 days, yeah.
I think it's the third year was this year. I think it was
Wait,
the last
yes,
one.
yes.
I got something right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. I've been to it. It's fascinating that the range of people who come from around the world of different types of music makers, different types of creators. It must make you very... Did you learn a lot from observing at something like Loop?
Yeah, so a lot of the Ableton staff go and engage. They either talk or they go as musicians and kind of absorb the sessions and stuff. It's pretty inspiring. So it's not like super technical. It's not even really about Ableton at all. It's really about creative practice. And sometimes that's, I don't know, William Basinski performed this year and he's like using tape loops and feedback and stuff like that, and there's nothing to do with computers at all. Yeah. Or we had a guy, I can't remember his name actually, I saw him play. It was quite amazing. He was this DJ, he might even be from, I can't remember where he's from. Anyway, he's using like Live 5 and he DJs with a mixer and his one hand just like on the trackpad, and there's this enormous live set of like a million things, and he just it's his instrument, he just plays it like this, and he's using his trackpad and his mixer, and it was cool. And he's like not using the latest thing, using like probably 10% of what Live does, and just had totally mastered it, and it was cool. And so it's a pretty cool thing. So we try to keep it pretty varied, and a lot of the times there's really different musical perspectives coming together, which is quite inspiring usually.
Now, one final question in relation to the community base. You spent the afternoon in Mount Temple, which is a school on the north side of Dublin. Ableton had this initiative with Push 1 that if you're basically buying Push 2, they would recondition. Is that me?
It's one of us.
You can turn it off. It's quiet enough. I can speak loud enough. So, in effect, if you had Push 1, you would bring it in, trade it in for Push 2, and then Ableton would recondition these machines and donate them to schools.
Yep.
So what was that experience like? I think they had 15 pushes in that school.
Yeah, I think so. There was probably maybe 30 kids that I was talking to, all kind of like 15, 16, 17. I mean, the motivation behind doing that is that a lot of...
and the schools get it for free.
Yeah.
And the software as well.
Yeah, we give them the push and the software for free. I mean, the hard thing with music technology in general is the bar for access is quite high. I mean, there's lots of cheap ways to get into music technology, but people usually want to learn the things that the artists they look at are using and stuff like this. And the barrier to entry for a school, or for especially in some of in the States, especially we're working with schools in some poor areas and stuff, is just trying to like expose those kids to the technology that they're interested in. And it's pretty cool. There's a guy called Lawrence Gray who runs a school in Los Angeles, I think, and it's like, what he says is, it sounds obvious, but kids want to make the kind of music that they like listening to. And so a lot of that is electronic and kind of, or dance music or hip hop and this kind of stuff. So traditional music education can be kind of challenging for someone who actually just wants to make beats. And so I don't know. It seems like there's quite a few people putting a lot of effort in that area to really like extend the way that music's being taught, and that was something that we wanted to support. Yeah,
I have to say with Ableton, if you haven't seen it on the Ableton website, there's this great learning music site.
Oh yeah,
that's just. Has anybody used that? Have you seen that? It's really, really, really impressive. And I think that there's a great commitment then to musicality that comes because of that. If we just go back to Ableton 10 for a little bit. When I was going through it, the thing that struck me is with a lot of the features that you've mentioned was how musical they've become. I mean, the ones that you're looking at today, like Echo, for instance, and Drum Bus, they're just great fun. Everything sounds really, really good. We have to have a look at this guitar pedal. There's like 3 settings, and you put it on. There's no hidden windows, just 3 dials, and everything sounds really, really good. I mean, maybe it's just my experience and captures the same thing. If like me, you're not a particularly gifted musician, captures brilliant because it stops you from having this kind of what we used to call red light fever. So you're playing away and you're going, oh, that's kind of good, and now you can just hit this button. Like there's magical things in this. I mean, you're being quite modest about the reception as Ableton 10 has received, and the community love it. And I have to thank you. It's really, really, really good.
It's good to hear.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm sorry. I don't work for Ableton.
It's terrible. We wanted people to hate it.
Because I have to admit, when I heard about it originally, you look for these like new, sexy kind of features, and then it was quite subtle because everything was like, we've graded this, we've graded that. But in actually working, I think you've just done an amazing job.
Well, I mean, we're really lucky actually because we have so many musicians that are happy to talk to us and that are quite close to us. So there'd been a group of maybe a few hundred people that have had Live 10 for maybe the last year and a half, maybe not quite that long, but so there's.
And will they report back to you?
Yeah.
How often?
I mean, we give them it and they'd be like, that bit sucks, and you're like, oh, damn. And you have to get feedback and learn. It's not like we can sit in a room with our thinking hats on and a bit of paper and work out the perfect solution, then go ta-da, and everyone loves it. It's like a lot of iteration and getting feedback. But also, so much of that you can also get from looking at how people work, and usually not by asking them what they want, but by watching them work. So it's like we're really lucky that many musicians let us go visit them, and we can sit with them and we can be like, can you show us how you work? And they'll make a piece of music and show us what they're doing, and it really helps us understand what the people that are using the software all the time actually need. And so that's kind of what I meant about, rather than starting with like, right, what's our marketing bullet point objective list of things we need to say on the internet, it's more like, how do we do the things that these musicians need to make better music or to more easily make the music they're making? And that's been, yeah, so it's a real privilege actually. It's always quite inspiring to go visit people. And we're just really lucky that we have so many artists and musicians and people like yourselves that we actually are able to engage with and talk to.
Now, one of the things that you've created in 10, which we should have a look at, I think would be interesting, is Wavetable.
Sure.
If we have a kind of an in detail, we'll have a look at that,
Okay.
because it's also mentioned, by the way, that today has been live streamed and recorded, so I should probably have asked your permission earlier, but at least we've notified everybody. So we have a look at this
Yeah, sure.
in a bit of detail, and then we'll have a question, Q&A.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, I'll show you Wavetable a little bit, and then we'll do some questions and stuff at the end. I'm always interested to hear what people want to know. So let me turn all that stuff off, and I'll load up Wavetable. It actually kind of exposes one of the main things we wanted to achieve with Wavetable, which is that when it's like this, all the controls are on the screen at the same time. There's no like menus or options or tabs. It's just all kind of in front of you. So a big part of what we wanted to do with this was make something that was really playable and programmable so that you could kind of make your own sounds with it. So it's a pretty capable synthesizer. It's got a ton of wavetables in it. Where am I? Let me turn, have I got solo on? There's that echo still going. Cool, let's turn that off. So the way a wavetable synthesizer works, who knows what a wavetable synthesizer, does anyone know what that means? Is this a familiar concept for people? So it's basically like it's playing back this waveform, and then I can morph through different shapes of the waveform to get different sounds. So there's a whole lot of different kinds of wavetables. Sometimes a wavetable, like as you move through it, it's almost like sweeping a filter. Sometimes it's got some distorted ones like this. So the wavetable itself defines a lot of the characteristics of the sound you're going to hear. What I'm going to do to show you Wavetable is actually use this one, which is the kind of most basic. So this is a sine wave, and it morphs to a square wave. So you can go like that. I might just switch over to push for the next bit so that I can kind of show you playing it, because a lot of what it's about is the playability. So this strip is doing what the modulation wheel on a keyboard does. It's the same thing. And what the modulation wheel is doing is sweeping through the position of the table, so I can kind of bend the sound as I play it. What I'm going to do now is grab something like the filter cutoff, and where am I? Go into edit mode, grab the filter cutoff, and I'm going to add it to the modulation matrix. Modulation matrix is the sorry, I'll switch back to live for a sec, is the thing in the middle of the synthesizer. Any minute now, it will appear magically. Yeah, the modulation matrix is this thing. This lets you assign modulation to stuff inside the synthesizer. So now that you know what I'm doing on push, I've just got this one strip that's doing modulation, and I'm just playing notes. I'll show you in the UI, it's probably easier. So that's doing the position already, but I can also have it control the filter frequency. So if I turn the filter up, I'm going to use one of the analog modeled filters because I like the way they distort. So now I can go, the filter sweeps down as I go. I can turn the unison on. Let's go with the classic unison, and then modulate the unison amount using the mod wheel as well. I'm going to take the LFO, and I'm going to adjust the amount using the modulation wheel. So as you can see, I'm just kind of clicking around the UI and adding sort of expression to the sound as I go. So because it's all in front of you, you don't really have to think about it. You just click on the thing you want and you add it to the matrix. And then let's add the LFO modulation to the filter frequency. So I'm using one oscillator and a sine wave and a square wave. But what's nice about it is it's really kind of playable. You can make these sounds that kind of talk and move the way that you want. And it's just kind of, I mean, I'm kind of more of an analog synth guy personally, and I find this is just a really fluid synth to program and make your own sounds with. There's other stuff in here like oscillator effects. These let you bend and shape the playback of the oscillator as well. Let's maybe do one of those on the modulation wheel as well, like the pulse width. So now when the yellow line is the sound that's actually playing. So when I've turned the sub oscillator on as well. So the sub oscillator kind of just adds in. I'll bring another oscillator in as well. Let's choose something more interesting to add there as well. And then we'll take the position of that sound and modulate it with the second LFO. And then we'll put echo on it because that sounds good on everything. What I should do, let's turn echo off. I'll show you pedal quickly because that thing's gnarly. So pedal is an analog modeled guitar stomp box. It kind of models an overdrive pedal, a distortion, and a fuzz. They're all circuit level analog models, so they sound really good. It's kind of a bit like a tube screamer, a Marshall Governor, and a fuzz face, but not exactly. They're models of those circuits, and then we kind of tweak them to taste. But it's pretty gnarly on synth stuff. Let's stick an auto filter after that and knock a bit of the top end off. Let's add a Max for Live shaper. And this thing is like a modulation device that you can draw the shape that you want it to modulate at, and then you can choose the rate. So in this case, I'm making it a bit slower. You can choose the depth, and you can offset where the modulation's happening. And I can do stuff like this. Let's also map that to, turn the browser off. So that's nice, something that's new, and this is not to do with Wavetable, but I'm in the zone, I'll show you this anyway, which is the modulation devices in Max for Live can now attach to more than one thing at once as well. So they're quite a lot easier to use and a bit nicer, but they can also do stuff like, so this shaper is now controlling the filter frequency, but it's also controlling my reverb send as well. So let's group that into a rack and add a dry chain so that it's not all filtered. Yeah, so it's a pretty deep synthesizer. Like I went through something pretty quickly there. I guess what I wanted to show is that it's the kind of thing where it's got a ton of great presets, which I can also show you if you want. So there's we had a lot of sound designers and stuff contribute to the presets for it. So if you're interested in just finding a quick sound and you don't want to program something, there's a lot of good stuff there. And it can do, like that's quite a gnarly sound, the one. Yeah, there's like a few hundred, I think. I can't remember. Yeah, sure. So, I mean, if we just look at the wave tables, I actually can't even remember how many there are. There's a lot. There's categories, and then each category has a whole bunch of different ones in there. and I can change that. So even just by choosing a different wavetable, change categories. So just, I mean, you can spend a lot of time just going through the tables to get different timbres and finding a sound that's in the zone that you like. Like as I said, I kind of like just using, so a wavetable can kind of capture some of the complicated stuff that you might do with a sound and give you an easy way to sort of morph through it. I actually find I usually tend to start with the basic analog shapes because the modulation and stuff is so powerful, you can kind of build that stuff yourself pretty easily. But yeah, it's a really, it's a pretty deep synthesizer, but we wanted it to be really approachable on the surface. So this lack of menus and menu diving and stuff was kind of quite important as well.
I like that, and just again an observation, but one of the things I think I was saying to you last night as well was the fact that so much now that you're not digging into menus, that you're just seeing it on the flat. It makes it all musical. It's quite a, it was kind of a big principle of it is that we wanted it to be like approachable but really deep as well. So if you're a sound designer who wants to nerd out on programming, it's pretty capable. But if you're someone that just wants to make a sound, it's also kind of approachable, and you don't have to feel like intimidated by it to get started with a sound. And of course, because we're live streaming, remind everybody that, if you can basically get an Ableton 10, you can download it, use the trial version for a month, so it will be fully functional. I really strongly recommend to do it because it is so much fun. I had preparing for this, I had to have a ball. Do you know what I mean? So
it's a pretty hard job doing this.
Shall we ask some questions?
Sure. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if there's something I showed or didn't show that you want to know about, please ask me. I'm happy to show it. Yo.
Editing clips 2 at a time.
Oh.
If you could show how does it look like to edit clips 2 at a time?
Yeah, sure. So that's the multi-MIDI clip editing stuff. There's 2 ways to do that. You can do it in the session view. You just basically select them both at the same time, and they both show up. So here I can see my drum kit at the bottom in grey, and then the purple thing is the Rhodes sample that I'm working with. If I want to switch over to the drum kit, I just hover on the notes for it, and then I click, and now that's the selected one, and I can edit it. So to work with more than one clip at once, you literally just select them and they show up, and you can see at the top all the different ones that are selected, and you'll see all of the content in line at the same time. And if there's a note available from another clip, you can hover it and click to go to that clip. So that's how it works in the session view. In the arrangement view, it's the same, but you select across tracks, and it will show you the contents of up to 8 tracks at the same time with MIDI notes in them. Yeah, it's quite cool for if you're trying to line up timing of different elements, or if you are trying to work on harmony across different parts and you want to work out where the voicings are clashing and stuff like that. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah. Any other questions?
Is there a plan for a standalone push ever?
People are certainly pretty interested in it. People are wanting to take just one thing on stage and stuff like that. It's not something that we have any immediate plans to release, that's for sure. But it's certainly something we understand people are interested in, yeah. What's your, why would you want one that's standalone as opposed to one that hooks up to a computer?
Just I'm sick of cables everywhere, and interfaces and just it's
just more stuff.
Simple. Yeah, well, just something that you could work on Ableton, and then have some version that you can just take on the road, and it's just simple, streamlined, without USB cables everywhere.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, cool.
That'd be nice.
Just write that in my notebook.
It'd be much appreciated. Thank you for that.
No more wires.
Speaking about no more wires, how many people has anybody used Link? Ableton Link, are you familiar with?
Link's pretty rad. It's one button, so it's kind of easy to be undersold. It's that tiny button in the top left corner that says Link. That's magic. What Link does is, if you have more than one instance of Live, or there's tons of iOS apps that work with Link as well, it synchronizes the tempo between the devices. So you can have 2 computers with live, or an iPhone with a drum machine on it and live and all this kind of stuff, and it just keeps everything in time perfectly. You can change tempo, you can start and stop the different machines at different times, and it all just kind of magically works. It's really awesome if you're collaborating with people and jamming, because it's kind of like a band. Like, no one person is in charge of the tempo, so if we're playing together, I can change the tempo, or if you want to, you can change the tempo. I can stop and your playback carries on, or you can stop and I'll carry on, this kind of thing. So it's very cool for collaboration and jamming together. And if you haven't checked it out, it's real easy to set up. You just get on the same network and push the button. So it's nice. I don't know if you've ever tried to use Midi clock, but it's a pain in the ass.
Oh, yeah.
So this was the like magic version of that. It's very cool.
And the other great thing is, I mean, because it's called Ableton Link. What was really good to see was how many other companies have adopted it as a protocol.
Yeah.
So, for instance, Korg, Tractor, it's inside of Tractor now.
Yep.
Resolume, it's inside of Serato.
Serato have it. Propeller Heads. There's lots of video apps. Is pretty cool actually, because a lot of the time you want to run video on a different machine than on your audio machine. But the iOS stuff's actually really cool. There's some really interesting, weird apps on iOS, or just kind of different because they're on a touchscreen. There's one called Patterning that I really like, which is a cool drum machine, and it's really easy just to have like an iPad sitting there, and it's just part of the setup, and you don't have to really do anything. It just works.
We're actually going to do a Signal special on iOS.
Oh, cool.
It's because I'm amazed because the stuff is so cheap, and we all have the devices. Like, not everybody can afford to have a push, but we all more or less, most of us have a smartphone of one form or another, or a tablet. That it's just incredible. So and the other thing that's very good as well, if you're an Ableton user, is that more and more of the apps, like all of the Novation apps, allow you to export an Ableton live set. So if you're doing something in your phone, it will export the audio, and then you can bring it home and load it up. So.
Yeah, you don't even have to use live at all. It works between like 2 phones or 2 apps on the same phone, this kind of stuff. So it's pretty cool, or on the same tablet or whatever. Yeah. Any more questions? More questions? One in the back there.
Great talk and great demonstration. I had a quick question. Obviously, with the effects that they have now, with your pedals, you have your echo. I come from a background where I play synths, and I've always had an issue where when I was plugging in a synth and playing live in a live setting, where the latency was always a bit of an issue. So has that changed much in 10?
The latency itself hasn't changed. I mean, the latency is defined by the buffer that you run your sound card at. And it depends on the effects or plugins that you're using actually. So the live devices, as a general rule, don't add any latency. They mostly will process inside the single buffer. If you use stuff like kind of heavy duty stuff like Isotope Ozone and stuff like that, a lot of those plugins actually add up to I think Ozone adds something like 8,192 samples of latency. So in terms of latency, nothing has changed in 10, but you should be able to get, if you're running at a 64 sample buffer, you can get...
usually what, just say for recording purposes, it's actually pretty good, but in a live setting, if you're trying to launch clips, just say if you're launching, say, push, but also playing guitar.
I think you can run into problems if you have too much routing in and out, or if you have plugins that are introducing latency. But there's not really much in the way of problems if you wanted to use like pedal and echo and amp and cabinet for your guitar and launch clips and play a synth at the same time. I kind of do that stuff all the time, and it works quite happily.
I actually use my computer.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you need a computer that can run at that low enough latency. So the sound card has a big part to play in that. I use the RME sound cards because they're really rock solid at low latency. Not all sound cards are, and a lot of the more modern sound cards have really. Like some of the new Thunderbolt ones have really robust processing at low latency. So it is a part of that. It's not really about the software, but you have to have a system that can run at that kind of low latency.
That's a great tip. Thanks.
Maybe also check your clips, for instance, the algorithm that you're using on your clips. You might be using Complex Pro unnecessarily. Or you might
use that quite a lot.
You don't really need to use that unless you're going to be doing serious time stretching during your performance.
Yeah, Complex Pro is actually, it's funny, people think because it's Pro, it's the best one. It's actually not.
That's usually the way for me.
So one of the things...
I'll just know, because this is...
I'm asking something, but leads you back to you. No, I know, but I'm going to ask you a question.
All right.
But if you cut, make sure you crop them nice and small, right? So you're not using like 5-minute samples of something you're only using 4 beats or 4, you know. One of the things that I noticed in the, once this is where I was leading you in, a lot of the beats that are now being loaded in the samples are set to repitch.
Yep.
Which sounds really musical and have lots of fun with. In 9, they seem to be generally set to beats. Was that a deliberate thing too?
Yeah, I mean, when we're making the sound content for each sound, you can kind of choose how it behaves when you stick it in. For breakbeats and stuff, if you want to get the classic sound of someone sampling breakbeats in a sampler, the way that they would change the speed would be to change the pitch. So actually having a breakbeat that repitches is kind of quite often what people almost expect, because that's how sampled music sounds, is it's like breaks played at different speeds. Just to go back to Complex Pro quickly, because this is one that people often misunderstand. The reason it's called Complex Pro is because it's designed for complex musical material, like full pieces of music. The Pro part is because it does formant corrections for vocals. So the only thing, the reason to use it is if you're repitching or time stretching an entire piece of music that has vocals in it, and it uses a lot of CPU to do that. If it doesn't include vocals, you can use Complex, but again, Complex is for complex musical material. Actually, if you're time stretching drums or even some music, like Beats mode is actually much more transparent and will sound better for transients and all that kind of stuff, and it's also way less CPU. So I think it's a common misconception that the one at the bottom of the list that says Pro is the best one to use for everything, but actually the different warp modes have different properties. The 3 other, like beats, tones, and textures, if you're not time stretching, they don't mess with the sound at all. Complex and Complex Pro, because I think they're phase vocoder based, so they always kind of change the sound a little bit, even if you're not time stretching. So actually, if you're working with recorded material and stuff, you're better, most of the time, you're better off to stick with beats, because it's way lower CPU, and it actually often sounds a lot better, especially for drums. Just in case, that's one that I get asked about a lot. So, and I've said my bit now, and I'll shut up.
No,
Anyone? Yeah.
Hi. About the Complex Pro files or samples, if you really need to have a sample in Complex Pro and you resample and then you use the resampled one, would you save some CPU or would it be the same thing?
Yeah, the 2 ways to save, I mean, the best way to save CPU is just to freeze it. If you freeze the track, then the time stretching gets applied and it won't be processed in real time. The other way is to resample it or re-record it, in which case you're no longer time stretching it, and
you can still use it as a beats sample.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, yeah, or unwarped is the simplest one. But if you are still thinking about changing tempo and stuff, often beats is a good choice. But I mean, freezing is the best way to do it. Complex Pro is really heavy on the CPU, especially if you do a lot of if you're stretching or pitching quite a lot.
Yeah.
So using the freeze function for that is the easiest way to do it. Yeah.
Right. I also have another question.
Yep.
Like if you load a Live 9 live set into a Live 10, would that work straight away? Or you have to do.
Yeah, it's completely compatible. You will get asked to save it as a Live 10 document if you want to save it in Live 10, because there's stuff in Live 10 that's not in Live 9. So once you've loaded it in 10, you have to save it as a new set, and then you can only open it in Live 10. But yeah, it'll give you a warning and ask you about that. The one thing I could quickly show, since the software's up on screen, one thing that not many people know and is related to freezing and is quite awesome. Let's go back to good old Boat here. Yeah, okay, so this is Boat, my Boat beat. If I freeze this track, like right-click it and freeze it, so imagine I was doing lots of complicated stuff here that was pounding my CPU and I was unhappy about that. If you make an audio track and drag the frozen stuff down, you get the frozen audio in the next track. But that might even be clearer if I do it with, so in this case I've got this MIDI here. Let's freeze this, like that, and then Alt drag it into a track and I get the audio. The frozen audio is now in my audio track. So I've got the MIDI one over here, which is frozen, and if I play it back, where's my mixer gone? So this one is, oh, I turned the echo off so it sounds crap, but never mind. That's my amazing piano playing right there. So that's the frozen track, right? And the thing that I dragged into the audio track next to it is just is that the audio of that. So when you're working with freezing, you can often you can use freezing as a quick way to resample something. You just freeze it, drag the audio out, and then you can unfreeze it and keep working. It's actually quite, not everyone knows you can do that, but it's quite cool. I often use that to, like, I've got a drum pattern going, I'll freeze it, drag it out, and process the audio, but keep sequencing the drums and stuff at the same time. Yeah, I know, it's just a little thing that not everyone knows.
No, that's very impressive.
Yeah.
Okay, we have time for one more question. There we are.
What's Ableton 10 going to be priced at?
That's actually a question that I don't know the answer to, which is kind of weird, but...
we have someone here, Dylan's here. And
Danny, you probably know the answer to this.
Enda, sorry.
Or Enda.
In euros, yeah, it's $3.99 for standard, but you can download it also. It's €50 less. Retailers can sell you downloadable copies as well, so you don't have to buy the box.
Do you mean as an upgrade or as a new purchase, I guess, is the difference as well?
New purchase, standard is $3.99.
Yeah. What's an upgrade from Suite to Suite? Something like $249 or something like that?
Yeah, I think it's around $179. I'm on the spot now.
Yeah.
In my head, but
Sorry,
it's just a little less than 200.
But basically, if you already own Live and you log into the website, it'll show you the prices for the various upgrades that your license allows for. So if you log into ableton.com, the reason I can't tell you off the top of my head is because it depends a lot on what license you're coming from and what version you want to go to. So when you log in, it'll tell you what the different prices options are you have for upgrading to Live 10. Yeah. Sorry, that wasn't a very elegant answer, but the website is a far more reliable source of information than I am, unfortunately.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Dylan.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for coming.
Let's give him a round of applause. Just before we finish, I'll just bring your attention to our next in the Signal series, which I think the date's on the board, which it's on the 18th of April. We have generic people who are actually themselves Ableton artists, and they're going to come and do a full installation here. They use a program called Resolume, which, if you're not familiar with, is almost like a visual version of Ableton. So if you're familiar with Ableton, Resolume is quite a natural fit. They have their own stage at the Electric Picnic. So here they'll be showing you how to vision map and taking Ableton through a visual experience through Resolume. I think we have a little video of what they did last night in Cork. We'll just show you this. This is about 30 seconds of what they did last night. There you go. All right, and it's interesting just to let you know what the sort of two computers there, and one is using Resolume and one is using Ableton, but they're both using Ableton Link, so that's the
right.
It's a little bit of a demonstration.
Yep. Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.